Yes, good morning, everybody. Good day. So happy about this and a little overview. And thank you, Emily, for that. I'll be really curious how the live chat feature will benefit the group. And you might hear a little background singing here. My wife Liz is a wonderful soprano, and she's preparing for a choral performance upstairs. So you might hear the glimmer of her beautiful soprano. And today we're going to start with a group discussion about your experience generally with the stillness practice. This was, pretty heavily underscored in the first session. I'd love to hear your experience with it, the various homework materials, questions, insights, etc. But first I want to offer some general thoughts as a kind of overview of how the course is designed. And I guess at the bottom of it is my belief that creativity is one of the direct results of mindfulness. Not that you have to, have a meditation practice to be a creative person or to be an artist, but I do think that mindfulness is something that is kind of a conduit in a way to opening up our imagination and opening ourselves to these kind of deeper pools of creative inspiration. A mind that periodically dips into the peace of stillness is, I think, more prone to make new connections, can understand issues from a fresh perspective. We have greater access to positivity and hope, and generally find trust in the flow of life's events. And for those of you who may consider yourself to be interpretive performers and not improvisers or composers, I want to say this. I have found improvisational studies to directly and positively affect my listening, my ensemble skills, general musical understanding. And in fact, I would say this is why improvisation was a bedrock in musical training up to about 1825, and why it's so important to reintroduce to contemporary training models. The emphasis is not to devote your life to improvising, but to become as complete a musician as possible and pass those skills on to your students. In this course, I'm suggesting these improv-oriented strategies as simple entry points for also integrating aspects of consciousness, mindfulness, mind training, whatever you want to call it. And to reiterate, we already have everything we need for musical freedom. What we're doing is becoming aware of the obstacles to it, accepting them, relaxing into them, releasing them. Step by step, we're freeing ourselves from the obstacles to musical freedom that we've basically imposed on ourselves. In our first session, I emphasized the consciousness side of this work, and today will be more about specific musical practices, while also integrating some ideas about mindful approaches. So, having said that, I would love to open up the call for comments and questions. If you had positive or negative experiences with the course materials over the past 2 weeks, whether it's positive or negative, you're sure to find resonance in the group. So your insights and comments, observations will be appreciated, I'm sure. So let's just open it up. Just come off mute and dive in. We'd love to hear you. We'd love to have a conversation. And we'll just do it this way, by just kind of a free-for-all. Take yourself off mute and offer what you'd like to offer. All comments, insights are welcome and invited.
Well, I'll go first since you invited.
Absolutely.
So the modal stuff was great. I realized in doing it the difference between my right and left hand. I never noticed that before. I'm a great teacher and I pick up on all this stuff and I'm like, oh, watch that second finger that it doesn't pop up. It was fun. And it, for me, I just totally made the connection with, Dorian, just, it's the scale, whatever the scale is up, it's one. So in the past, I got all mental with, trying to figure it out. And this was like, simple, not Dorian or Lydian, any mode. All you do is you go to, for me, C is easy. You just go to the fourth degree or the second degree or whatever. So that was kind of cool that it was an instantaneous like realization of that. I found the play alongs difficult. And whether it's just cello with harp or just the atonal or dissonance and such. And I found myself resisting it. And then, of course, when you said to record, total resistance with that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Looking at my face in a recording, I mean, we're just so critical. I just did a wassailing or wassailing in Waterbury, and it was so much fun. And we got recorded, and we were actually quite good. There were 7 of us. I played the harp in 9 degrees outside. We went around to the different bars. And it was a lot of fun, both singing and playing. And but it's just funny how critical we are. I mean, I noticed my hand technique says, "Is it really that bad?" Those kinds of things we do to ourselves. And so it's really funny when you said record. And I've always been like this. Elizabeth Von Trapp, I'm sure you guys know of her. I remember her telling me early on in both of our careers that the music business was 90% business and 10% music. And of course, I just totally threw that out because I didn't want to do that. But
I don't want to do that.
She was always one for recording, but in a very positive way of hearing what you hear, seeing what you see, and making those adjustments rather than taking it personally, right? So, that's just some of the stuff with the music, and I want to give other people a chance.
That's great, Judy. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love your comment that you found it funny, how your mind was working, because I do think ultimately we have to laugh. So thank you for that. That's
You're
excellent.
welcome.
Also interesting to me that you had kind of easier with the limitations of the Dorian scale and the free stuff, whether it was just the sound of the harp and the cello together, or whatever, that was a little less intuitive for you. So I can't wait for the next chance we have to actually sit in a room and jam it out, because a lot of this stuff is, you just get it, is very contextual in a way. But thank you for that. Who's next?
I would love to share. Can
Please.
you hear me? Hi, you guys. I'm Nicole. I watched you all on the replay. I didn't meet you last time. Super excited to be friends with all of you.
Hey, Nicole.
And I first met Eugene in 2018 and then started online coursework with him in 2020. So I was super pumped about this course because I'm a super fan of his ever since I heard his first album. And but I expected it to be, like a rekindling, a reawakening. I've had lots of bursts of learning with Eugene, but this class really caught me off guard. And I told Eugene that I was listening to the replay while I was driving, and he got to the part where he said that affirmation, and I started having a huge emotional release, and I thought I should not be driving. So I pulled over to the side of the freeway, passed through me, even though I didn't have my cello in me.
Wow.
So it was awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, I love that, Nicole. I love the image of you pulling over to breathe in that affirmation, and it makes me want to print out that affirmation and offer it to the group. Maybe it's useful for people.
It was so impactful for me. I'm not sure how to even describe it. And one thing that was really cool is as I've returned to my practice of silence with my cello, one thing I've noticed is I have silence with my instrument and my body has revealed so much of a different side of me and so many layers than silence while sitting or even silence while moving. So I decided that since I'm more practiced in silence with sitting with my cello, that I would practice silence while sitting. And may I play for you in my favorite language? I think you'll understand better than my words what the experience I've had this week in silence with sitting.
Wow, sure. Is your original sound on?
I think so.
Yep, I got that. Yeah, yeah.
Thank
Let's
you
see.
for laughing. I knew you'd
Where's
get it.
where's my clapping icon? Oh, there we go. Oh, that's awesome, Nicole. That's
I
great.
have work to do.
Not at all, man. That's the epitome of musical freedom. Wow, beautiful. Oh, that's great. Who's next?
Well,
Back
Eugene,
from
I enjoyed it. This is Claire over in Scotland, Claire Gerbedian, and I enjoyed it. I did the improving pretty much every day. I liked going back again to doing more of the Dorian and more of the Lydian work. I gravitate more towards Dorian, but Lydian, I worked more with because I knew it wasn't grabbing me quite as the same way, and it helps because I also last weekend was Burns night here. So and I play with this lovely, funny Scottish fiddler now, and he's really able to just really jam on, and it's all modal. I mean, all the Scottish stuff is totally modal. I got that from when I first worked with you. I was like, oh yeah, okay, so that's all it is. And there's one piece we do where we just riff off. It's just like a G Dorian thing that goes on and on and on. And I'm feeling much more able to do that. And I'm really pleased about that. I feel like I'm getting uh, more language on this in the freedom part, which I'm grateful to you largely for planting those seeds back in lockdown. And I found working with your free improvs, they were fine. They didn't grab me as much as I wanted to. I realized too that I need to work more with, I tend to gravitate towards slow playing, and I want to get so that I can do more rhythmical and fast playing, because that is, I notice that all the time nowadays. And so yeah, and I haven't done any of the recording. I need to set things up right here to do that. But I've always wanted to understand GarageBand more. I had years ago when I first was introduced to iReal Pro from you, I took down exercises that were on that forum for just jamming on Dorian and isolating whatever key and just doing that. That was a lot of fun. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
That is a wonderful report and update. I'm glad to hear all of that. Thank you so much.
is my sound on?
Yes, Helmut.
Helmut. I'm Helmut. It's very nice to see you guys again. And
Good to see you, Helmut.
good to meet you. Yes, I just came back from London, Ontario, where I had a 2-day workshop, and I started out the workshop with the Peace piece. What a great piece to start it out with, because there were several classical musicians who never improvised, but just being able, like doing something with one note, and filling out and slowly building up a vocabulary and exploring musical phrases, longer phrases, and then being inside and going slowly outside. It was great. We spent the first hour exploring that piece. And then afterwards I did exercises with it, because a lot of it is mixed Lydian scale. And so I spoke about other modes you can use with this scale. And so it was a great intro into this session with actually that piece. And speaking about your free impros, I very much like the kind of sometimes abstract, more dissonant things. So I enjoyed it very much. So you tritones in the first example, and
Oh, good, Helmut. Yeah, I mean, I love playing that way with you.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
always
yeah,
such an adventure. Yeah, and I'm also really heartened to hear that some of the materials that we've talked about are helpful to you as an educator. Also, that's one of the hopes for this whole course, is that it may generate more materials, and because some of these ideas I think are very familiar for you, Helmut, as a player. But perhaps if there's something that could be offered that would invite other people into the improvisational range and give people more confidence to just raise their voices, then that's what it's all about. So bravo.
Thank you. For me too,
Yeah.
it's the reason I'm participating. Of course, I learned so many more things, but finding a new approach to teach it, and what you're giving me and us is exactly that which will enrich, I think, my vocabulary of elements to propose and explore with that. So thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Thank you, Helmut. Let's hear some more voices,
I'll go. This is
please.
Marcia. Hi. Um, I remember one of the recordings that you gave us this week to improvise with. You began pizzicato, and I could sense right away there was some kind of chord progression. And of course, I didn't know what that was, but I watched in the process of those few minutes, letting go of a need to know the chords, and realizing that I could approach this rhythmically, not harmonically.
Yeah, great.
And
I
that
mean
was
that.
yeah. Go.
I just want to add one thing, Marcia. I had no intention of playing any chords, so I didn't mean to suggest a chord progression. If that's any comfort, go
Well,
ahead.
no, for me it was a perfect thing, because I think that's something I come up against, being a classically trained, where they didn't write the chords on our music, and we did.
But maybe I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
Do you mean to say that it activates your kind of analytical listening? Yeah,
yes, totally. It
we talked
activates
about that.
Yeah, and it's not my strong suit musically.
Hmm.
So that, needing to know those chords sort of trumps every other way into playing music. And so by the end of that 4-minute piece that you gave us, I was just rhythmically going in and feeling like, well, if I hear a note to move to, great, which might be more with what you're doing, but it wasn't paralyzing me the same way. And also this morning, when as the session started with the Kind of Blue CD, I was just rhythmically, I did the same thing. It was instead of that sense of, I don't know these chords for these pieces, it didn't matter. I was just rhythmically relating. And it gives a lot more, for me, it gives a lot more room for silence, because I'm leaving the melodic, here we are bowing our cellos, and the constancy of tone versus coming and going of rhythm. It's a real freeing element for me on the cello.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear, Marcia. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and it could be that you said that analyzing was not your strong suit. I mean, maybe that's a gift also, that you can immerse yourself in that sound and let the sound guide you. I love this quote by this who was he? I think you'd call him a humanistic psychologist, Fritz Perls. There's a famous one, lose your mind and come to your senses. It applies to a lot of great free improv stuff. I always think about that. Thank you, Marcia. Who else?
Well, I'd like to say something.
Please.
So I could totally relate to what you said, Marcia, because as a classically trained musician, I'm always looking for what chord I'm playing if I'm playing with other people. And I'm about to play with a singer-songwriter and have been learning her songs. And they're great songs and full of social justice ideas. And But I want to look at those chord symbols, and it because it helps me know what to play. But I have on two of them at least gotten away from looking at the music, which is great. So your idea of relating rhythmically is a really good one for me. And I had a really hard time with your 4 different things to play with. I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And I had a question for you. Number 2, at 3 minutes, there's all these incredible da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, and I think they're pizzicatos, but they're just wonderful. Okay, what else? I had read The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer a long time ago. And so I found his ideas in The Untethered Life very familiar, but much more concise. He kind of made it a summary, which is great. And, the idea of the mind and the emotions and all those things that are in our heads all the time, as a kind of beginning meditator, I've been really working with that. And he's a very insightful character. He really is.
Great. I get all that, Janet. Thank you for that. Yeah, and thank you for bringing in the aspects of the consciousness, part of this course too. I'm definitely curious to hear from other people how this part of the work is affecting you or affecting your practice.
Hi, it's Christina. Can you hear me?
Looks like there's 2 of us.
Christina, let's say Christina. Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, I found it interesting that it brought me to a lot of reflection, and something that really I struggled with actually with the different recordings was my need for call and response or silence in between. I guess it never occurred to me that I could just stop playing for a while and listen, because I need those spaces of silence to hear. And it could be also just the, hearing something that's recorded and then you hear close what's on your instrument. And often that repetitive cycle, a chord progression or something, sometimes that helps me relax into a space of finding something. I didn't find it difficult to just let myself do whatever was going to come. I think it was interesting to switch between pizzicato, and that was kind of new. I think taking the bow away sometimes is just, then it's shorter. It's, I like to explore that. And sometimes it was easier to listen then too, when I was using pizzicato to hear what was happening. And I almost sometimes thought, okay, sometimes I'm taking a guide. There's something that's repetition was important for me. So when I heard something again, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like responding to that. So I guess I found that different in our session. When we were doing the session last time, it was you played and then there was a silence. And that was super simple for me. Whereas playing on top of another person's playing and not necessarily clearly hearing it, there's a real, I'm fighting.
This is so good, Christina, and it's so good that you develop a kind of a sense of the parameters or the environment that is comfortable for you and seems to kind of free you up a little bit. I think that's an incredibly important awareness to have.
The other thing that I was brought awareness was how little exposure to the modes, even as somebody going through classical training, not so much on the cello, the violin, it really made me go down I'm going to call it a rabbit hole of theory, trying to figure out where are we deriving this, what is the
We'll talk more about that today.
Yeah, but also questioning. Also, yeah, just it was a stretch for me, some of that, and just admitting that and going, that's okay. We'll take a challenge to try some of those. And the vocal rhythms, something else that occurred to me is how auditory a learner I am. So if somebody played me the scale and I can watch, no problems. Somebody says the rhythm or plays the rhythm, I get it.
Good, and that's what we're going to do today. So yeah. Fantastic.
So
That's really helpful. Yeah, it's good to get to know you too, Christina. Thank you for that.
If it's okay, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, George.
Um, a few things. Um, when we talk about what was that wonderful quote that you said about analysis or whatever? It
Lose
doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
lose your mind and come to your senses.
Right. I think of Descartes and I changed Descartes and I say, I think less, therefore that seems to make sense.
I love that. Oh
Yeah.
man, I'm going to put that up on a plaque. That's good.
The other thing, let me see, who it keeps leaving the big view, so I can't see the name of somebody. Oh, Nicole. Nicole, when you were playing, it reminded me of in the conversation with Eugene and Barbara. Am I correct saying her name? Yeah. That she said um, that one thing she thinks that she, gets into a space by thinking, where do I want to put my heart? Where do I want to put my mind? And it, as soon as you started playing, all I could think of was she knows where her heart is. And that is what, people hear. And I think that's the Barber brings that out quite a bit as well. And uh, about playing along with Eugene with your improv, you and I both know, and I think others have alluded to it, it's hard to do because what it really, well, two things. One, it's an interplay generally when you're able to do that with another person. And that's what starts to give it form, rhythmic, whatever it is. And the other thing is when, who mentioned about the rhythmic connection first?
Marcia, yeah.
Yes, I think that people have often said, it's the rhythm that people who are listening, that's what they hear.
Hmm.
And I've seen somebody take over a chord, doesn't belong at all, whatever pattern they're playing, but they can repeat it no matter what's going on. And it's really terrific. Yeah.
It's really engaging. Yeah. Yeah, rhythm. Well, that's a gift from Africa, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. And
Yeah.
and we're here to keep it going. So thank you, George. Great comments. So appreciated.
Hey,
Anything else?
hi
Yeah, go ahead.
everyone. I wanted to say first of all, I have a pulled back muscle that's a few weeks old, and I'm
Oh man.
struggling today with like sitting, so I'm gonna have to keep getting up. So I'm
Okay.
keep turning my camera off. But I just wanted to say I had told you at the first workshop I have historically struggled with still meditation, and I continued to struggle with it, but I did try several times, and I built up. Basically, my mind would just keep leaving. Uh, so I did keep trying, and I was able to at least get like one time I actually got through 5 minutes, and when the timer went off, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I made it through 5 minutes." So
That this is big.
yeah.
This is big. It really is.
So I wanted to say that I loved this is sort of a continuation of the modal work I had started with you on a previous workshop, and I really enjoyed the modes. The Takadimi approach, I don't know if any of you know Trina Basu Ramamurthy. She's this wonderful Carnatic violinist, and I teach with her, and she has been using this method with our students, and they have really embraced it, and it's really helped. So when I saw that, I got very excited, and the next class I went in and I told them, "Hey, I'm taking a workshop in this game," and shared that particular rhythm with them, and they really enjoyed that too. And I didn't say this last time. I did the audio version of Untethered Life, and
Living untethered.
thank
Yeah.
you, Living Untethered. And while I I appreciated so much of the content. I struggled at times. It, I it can be very difficult when you perceive like a a disparate sort of privilege that comes across a little bit entitled. I have difficulty sometimes separating the message, like the content, from my aversion to entitled behavior. So it's not like I disagreed with a lot of stuff that was in the book, but I did struggle with that, and I was relieved to reach like the ending portions of the book. But I also have other resources that, you know, maybe
Right.
I identify a bit more with the authors, and so that was, for better or worse, I noticed that about myself, my reaction to it. But anyway, thank you, and I am here even if my camera goes off.
That's all really, really good to hear, Patricia. Thank you and for that feedback on Michael A. Singer too. And you know, it could be that there are elements in there. There's a tone in there that I am tone deaf to, and I can acknowledge that. And would always wish that if there are other materials that you find more resonant for you, that I would love for you to share those with me and with the group. So that would be great. Beautiful. And hooray on that 5 minutes. I mean, that is a big 5 minutes. That really is. That could be the 5 minutes that changed the world. Standing or sitting. Awesome. Well, this is wonderful. Anything else you'd like to share?
I'll jump in and share. I'm glad you said that, Patricia. You and I communicated a little bit, and I did 3 minutes, and I'm really grateful, Eugene, for what you did in the session where you walked us through a process, because it gave me something I could repeat since this is new to me. So I did the same process of 1 minute, how am I doing? Another, and then, well, actually, I wrote some affirmation. So I wrote a prior affirmation of, I'll read some of it. I choose to drop the needle despite the imperfections of my space and myself and my thoughts. Here in this moment, I sit still for 3 minutes. I choose to acknowledge and turn the inner soundboard down, or take time to deal with what comes up. I will reach out for help if needed. So I
Wow,
read
that's
that,
powerful.
and then I did 1 minute of how am I doing, and then 1 minute of breathing, and 1 minute just trying to be still. And that felt really good to me. I think I could expand on that in the next week or two. The first time I did it, all I did was cry. There's just so much stuff in my life, cello and unrelated. And the last 2 weeks has had a lot of movement for me, from therapy to a lot of playing stuff. And I've appreciated the homework to kind of remind me to take time to try to be in this space. And I did not do it every day, but when I did, it was really helpful. And I feel like I could talk for a long time, but last night I did a performance that was all improv with a dancer. It was about a 20-minute piece. And we've been practicing improv and stuff, but what I was really focusing on was a quote from Karita Kent, and I put it in the chat of art is from responding, not from thinking. And it was a really amazing performance, and I'm just grateful for the work we're doing here and where I can go next.
Really powerful sharing. Thank you so much, Esther. That's really great. Those affirmations are just beautiful, and thank you for what you shared. Would anyone like to? Let's just breathe that in for a second, and if anyone would like to respond, let's allow space for that. Well, we'll give one last little moment for someone to. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm getting reverb. Sorry. I'm on two machines here.
Oh, gotcha, David. Yeah.
Let me go to another room. So I think you know that I did the play-alongs. I skipped 2. I did 1, 3, and 4. To make a long story short, I loved 1 and 3 as I've written to you, and then 4 was very challenging, and I think I made a mess of it, but I sent it to you anyway.
I haven't checked that one out yet, but I love the other ones, David. Yeah, and it's just I'm absolutely so intrigued and delighted to see how people are interacting with the various play-along stuff. So please don't feel shy about sharing those. Anybody, I just know that I'm eagerly awaiting them, and I'm very, very tickled to hear it. So
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And it seemed to be enjoyable for you, David.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely
that's
wonderful.
great.
I loved it. I'm still hearing that
Absolutely
in my head, the theme that you expressed in 1, just that A, the A harmonic.
Right.
And the
Well,
rhythm behind it.
very cool. Well, we're going to dive into all of that and more today. So
Good.
let's move into the next portion of our time together, then, shall we? Unless there's another comment that people are passionate to make. I noticed seeing my picture in the postage stamp there that, excuse me, wearing my beanie. It's a cold day here in New Hampshire, so this helps keep my head warm and consequently my whole body. So last time we talked a lot about the value of a stillness practice, and maybe you could summarize that as kind of exploring different levels of reality. And to have personal experience navigating these different levels with awareness is, I think, the beginning of finding a kind of on-ramp to the musical freedom that we're all passionate about finding. And the process you could also think of as finding a kind of creative maturity, or think of it as artistic individuation. Finding an expression that integrates all the practices you've done and all the practicing you've done, your outer work, in other words, you're practicing with your life experiences, and your inner work. So, and maybe it's helpful to kind of break that down a little, starting with what you might call direct creative experience. And most of my motivation comes from having had moments where I was surprised by something that was coming out of my instrument. And I believe we've all had this, even if, fleeting. But these moments are incredibly important to acknowledge. If you can remember these moments and experience it, even if they're a tiny little moment of something that kind of delights you, that is something to really underscore and have appreciation for. These moments are incredibly important to just say and to acknowledge. And one of my mentors, I keep mentioning Ed Sareth, he says that there's no stronger motivation than perceiving your creative expressions as a direct mirror of your outer and your inner worlds. You perceive your creative expression as a direct mirror of your inner and outer worlds. And understanding that further development creatively is the key to integrate our inner and outer worlds. So these are the moments where you've opened a kind of inner door and allowed something out. And our appreciation for that signals to that energy that it's welcome and that we're paying attention to it. Seems very, very subtle, but I think it's a subtlety that deserves underscoring. That when we do have these moments, these glimmers of creative originality, something that just surprises and delights us, that we really take note of it, because that is the kind of spark that can ignite our curiosity about about moving forward. I think our appreciation kind of greases that squeaky door so it flies open when we call. And I find it helpful to call a moment like that a kind of miracle, actually. And that's what it feels like. It's a moment that puts together who I am as a musician with an original, coherent musical expression. It's like I didn't do it, it just happened. I prepared for it, but it seemed like it happened by itself. So I would suggest that if we think of that as a miracle, that we consider ourselves to be miracle ready. You know, just to go through your day being prepared for something amazing to happen. We're miracle ready. Let's prepare ourselves to receive miracles, particularly when we're improvising, when we're going into that space. So we talk about this artistic individuation and on the musical maturity, call it. And on that path, we're just talking about direct creative experience. And then another aspect of that I would call reflection. And some of you have mentioned this already today. The reflection is where we think about the meaning and the purpose of our art. And the reflection is also where we assess our strengths and weaknesses in relation to that meaning and purpose. And we also strategize how to improve. And so the reflection leads us to kind of teaching ourselves, since what we practice is directly informed by how we evaluate where we're at. And that leads naturally to the next step, direct creative experience, reflection, and then to our craft. Because musicians are all about craft, right? So much of our time is spent on training our fingers, our ears. Our craft makes us ready for the many different facets of music and of expression, and it makes us worthy vessels, so to speak. Direct creative experience, reflection, and craft. And they don't fall neatly into a timeline. It's not like climbing up a ladder. They occur in differing orders and are ongoing processes in our life, and in the life of an artist. Last time, 2 weeks ago in session 1, I emphasized focused attention and developing a stillness practice to get better at it. I also emphasized the power of intention and how that affects the consistency of our work. And the third point was positive thinking and affirmation, making conscious efforts to harmonize with the traits of a forgiving and loving source at the center of our being. And I visualize this as a kind of intonation. For example, when I play a middle C on the cello in tune, I will see my low C string vibrate sympathetically. It also works the other way. I can play, for example, like a low D, and then my open D string will vibrate. I'm sure you guys all know this. In fact, the whole instrument rings differently when we're in tune. And I believe our positivity works this way. Our positivity activates a kind of sympathy with our deepest knowing. We'll continue with these 3 strategies: focused attention, the power of intention, and positive thinking, as we kind of talk about some new musical things today. And we're going to begin exploring musical freedom in the context of modal improv today. And we'll be focusing on 3 modes: Ionian, or major scale, the Dorian mode, and the Lydian mode. These are things that I sent in the practice materials, and it sounds like many of you have taken a look at this. These are all scales that are familiar to a practice player. But hearing them in a fresh context can bring new things out in your playing. And that's our goal for today, to expand on the reflexive responses of free improv while exploring specific tonal colors. Now we're adopting a limitation to our note choices as a way of refining our tonal syntax, you might say. Syntax is about how language works, but I'm using the word syntax to describe the musical elements that go into defining a style, namely harmony, melody, and rhythm. These, I think, are the real syntactical elements of music. Even if you want to spend your life playing free improvs that you couldn't label as being in a specific style, like non-idiomatic improvising, having familiarity with varied forms of musical syntax is still invaluable. Non-syntactic elements, like sound color, which includes dynamics, and texture, those I would call non-syntactic musical elements. And the play-alongs from session 1 favor non-syntactic engagement. You don't really need to be a master of rhythm or harmony or melody to engage, creatively with those play-alongs. You can just let her rip. Just let your instrument play it. And wonderful music can be made that way. I love playing that way, and I don't know if it will ever become commercially viable, but it should. It really should, especially in the weird times that we're living in, where we're just desperately looking for any kind of language that bursts us out of our cages. And speaking of like free improv and kind of the non-syntactic free improv, it's a great gateway for new improvisers to begin to listen and respond intuitively. And I love this, and I've just seen this work magic so many times, of having a player who has never improvised before and encouraging that player just to engage conversationally and kind of non-syntactically. In other words, just make a sound, don't worry about melody, harmony, even rhythm. Rhythm usually comes pretty naturally to people, but even so, great music can be made with that kind of interaction, spontaneity. And I think even you can experience mastery playing this way. And I've had this feeling with little kids who have demonstrated a kind of mastery, even though they've just started playing their instruments. You look at them, they've got a spark in their eye, and you begin having this back and forth with sounds, and it can really turn into something so alive. But we're all contemporary musicians, and I think we'll find kind of more expressive precision and comfort in a variety of varied musical settings by exploring musical syntax more fully. And that brings us to the major scale and its modes. So let's start with the C major scale. I think we all know this one. Excuse me. And keep in mind what Arnold Schoenberg said, the father of 12-tone music. He admitted that there was still much good music to be written in C major. I love it that he said that. The 7 notes of this scale, C major scale is what we're talking about. That's a diatonic scale. That's called a diatonic scale, a 7-note scale. And if the music that you're playing is in the key of C, the 7 notes of the C scale will work perfectly to create melodies. And if you land on a scale tone that's wrong sounding, you just go up a step or down. Simple, right? Why does this work? Well, if you consider that chords are generally built with 4 notes, the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, and there are only 7 notes in the scale, you have more than a 50% chance of playing a chord tone with any note of the scale. I love that. You're just playing the odds. What casino would go with that? And if the note you're landing on feels like a tension, so-called wrong note, then just moving up or down a step will release that tension. So that is kind of explains why this works so well, by just playing in C major. And for some reason, for me as an improviser, this was such a tremendous light bulb moment to like, oh, you mean it's not all about my ears. If I actually know what key I'm in, that really helps my ears and my fingers to unite and to be able to create these melodies and find the notes I'm looking for. I don't know why that took me quite a while to consider that, but it's because I didn't have this course to take back then, or a good school even that taught these kinds of things. And you have looked at some of these exercises I sent before, and you might have noticed that the scale patterns I made for the modal scales, you can use those same patterns, of course, and many more for any scales, even like pentatonic scales. The patterns are useful for creating muscle memory, but also for connecting the ear and hand, which is incredibly invaluable for improvising. So to warm up for our first improv, let's review a couple of characteristics of C major. And we'll play with this. We'll use the track we played to in our December webinar, Peace Piece by Bill Evans, but this time we'll approach it with a different affirmation and a kind of invocation. Now that we've talked about stillness a bit and developing our abilities to focus, and to kind of take note of our restless minds, you might have a new sense of the word peace. So before we improvise on this, I'd like to do a short guided meditation, and this one is inspired by Tara Brach. Tara Brach is a meditation teacher who has a lot of materials and guided meditations on her website, B-R-A-C-H, Tara Brach. And after this, I'm just going to run the piano loop of Bill Evans playing this Peace Piece. And I'm just going to kind of rely on your familiarity with C major to just enjoy this process. Allow your instrument to speak. Allow your instrument to not speak. Play when you have the impulse to play. And allow silence to help you tune in to the deep peace inside of you, but also into the kind of beauty and simplicity of Bill's chords, the environment that he's creating. So I'm going to get this ready. And now, as you're sitting with your instrument, just make sure you're sitting comfortably. I might suggest having your feet on the floor. Let's take a couple of breaths together. Again, we don't need to breathe in any specific way. We just kind of take note of the effects of our breathing. We can feel the air moving in and out of our nostrils. We might feel our abdomen rise and fall with our breath. Just start to arrive in this place with our instrument. And then we imagine we're sitting comfortably with our instrument. And we're outside. We're under a clear sky. The air around us is warm. And the only sound is the light breeze. We hear a light breeze in the treetops, the occasional bird song. Our face is calm. Your brow relaxed. Your eyes relax as you bring the slightest lift to the outside of your eyes. Your eyes are smiling. And that brings the corners of your mouth into a slight smile too. The smile extends down into your throat and down into your heart. You can feel your heart smiling now. Feeling into your hands, you notice that you can feel your pulse there. Your hands are warm. And you feel the smile pushing energy through your hands. You are supremely comfortable, safe, with no desire but to reflect this deep smile as you get ready to play your instrument. That's Bill Evans. And I'll be including this loop along with the materials that we'll have available for you tomorrow, because there's something about this that is deeply reassuring and brings out something different inside me every time. And that's, you could call that a piece of modal music. You know, that's chiefly in the Ionian mode. And Bill, in his solo, which is well worth studying, you know, uses some so-called wrong notes to kind of expand the colors, to add surprise and little sparks in there, and that's worth taking note of too. But let's move on to kind of looking at some of the other modes, in particular the Dorian mode. And we started the session with Miles Davis, this recording, a song called So What, from his album Kind of Blue. And most people regard that album, Kind of Blue, as the first modal jazz album. And the modal origins of Kind of Blue came from an important book by George Russell, published in 1953, called The Lydian Chromatic Concept of Tonal Organization. Bill Evans, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and many, many others cited this book, The Lydian Concept, as a major influence. The album, Kind of Blue, which came out in, I think it was 1959, is the best-selling jazz album of all time. It's sold, at this point, over 5 million copies. And its modal fabric really invites a kind of melodic improvising that feels deep, kind of deeply natural, and even meditative. And beside the fact that the music departs from the repetitive and fast chord changes that was really popular in jazz at that point with bebop, and a lot of it designed on kind of song forms, Kind of Blue features tracks that are really long, like 4 out of the 5 tracks are almost 10 minutes long, way longer than normal radio play tracks of that time. And there's very little editing on this album. The solos were all single takes, and I think that gives the impression of a story being told, you know, musicians in deep exploration and expression. You can listen to this album closely, and there's a lot to learn, and people transcribe these solos to understand every single note and the rhythm that the players are playing. But it also creates a very distinctive and kind of introspective atmosphere that's unmistakable even as background or kind of ambient music. Miles himself said about this album, no chords. Gives you a lot more freedom and space to hear things. When you go this way, you can go on forever. You don't have to worry about changes, and you can do more with the melody line. It becomes a challenge to see how to see how melodically innovative you can be. This is still Miles talking. When you're based on chords, you know that at the end of 32 bars that the chords run out and there's nothing to do but repeat what you've just done with variations. And Miles says, I think a movement in jazz is beginning away from the conventional string of chords. Fewer chords, infinite possibilities. So that's Miles. And let's look at modes generally, then take a dive into a couple of specific modes. And I asked Emily to put up this PDF, Modes of the Major Scale. You can make a scale beginning on any note of the major scale, and these all have modal names. Numbering each note of the modal scale, numbering each note of the major scale, I associate each mode with a number. Dorian is 1. Ionian is 1, Dorian is the second mode, Phrygian is the third, etc. And you'll notice that the Dorian mode, for example, can be described as a minor scale with a raised 6th scale degree. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you were in the key of D minor, the key of D minor has 1 flat in it, so the B would be flatted. But you see this Dorian mode has a B natural in it. So that gives it a very distinctive sound as a minor scale. And you can create a Dorian scale on any note by thinking of the root as being a whole step above the note, which is the tonic of the key signature. So like in this PDF, you see the Dorian scale. It has no sharps or flats. That's the same key signature of the key of C major. So D is the second note in the C major scale. And I think of that D as being the second mode. So if I'm starting a Dorian scale on D, I just go down a whole step to find my key signature. So E Dorian scale would use the key signature of D. B Dorian, which we've studied and will keep at today with, uses the key signature of A major. So by playing a scale starting on B but using the key signature of A, I'm playing a Dorian scale. Until you're familiar with the sound of the Dorian scale, this is a handy way of understanding the scale. But the real fun is when you begin to really hear the root of the mode as the tonal center of your music. And our intro music today was the tune So What, as I said, from Kind of Blue. The melody played by the bass is in the Dorian mode. The bass plays. So this scale, the Dorian scale, and you all know this, and the solos by Miles and John Coltrane and Cannibal Adderley all use the Dorian mode with some added tensions. The original key of So What is D Dorian, and there's one harmonic move up a half step to E flat Dorian. Great keys for the horn players. And so I've made an arrangement of this song in B Dorian with a move to C Dorian. That way we string players can use the open D and A strings for both modes. Maybe a little bit easier to manage than E flat Dorian. But obviously for you vocalists, pianists, and George, trombonist, find a key that is the most comfortable. Hey, that's what singers always do, right? They just get comfortable with whatever you're playing. Make it work for you. And I'm going to present several different levels of learning this song. When you work on this at home, stay with each level as long as it takes to really get comfortable with it. Experience musical freedom with each level. So the level 1 is, what I implied with the materials from last week. Just get inside the scale, make your fingers play it by themselves, and begin to make what I would say emotional and psychological associations with the sound of the Dorian mode. I start by playing it over a drone. I want to feel how every note of this scale sounds against the root tonality. I might play some scale patterns to deepen my relationship with the scale. Then I'll begin exploring some melodic ideas, improvise some phrases, always noting the sound in relation to the drone, the tonality. So, Emily, could you just show this YouTube page? This is just one example of these beautiful drones that Marcia Sloan, who's on this call, made some time ago, and you can get these on YouTube, and they are still the most beautiful drones you can find. It's a cello just playing a 6-minute version of a root in fifth, and no matter what instrument you play or sing, this is just a beautiful ambient environment to set up in your room, and it will invite your deep engagement with it. Just the sound is so beautiful. So I would do that with the B Dorian scale, and then do the same process with the C Dorian scale. Again, these are the two scales we're going to use as we learn this tune. And in the interest of time, let's assume that you've done this. You've internalized this mode in B and in C. And then when you're ready to add rhythm, pull up a play along. So let's look at the iReal Pro version of So What. iReal Pro version of So What. And here it comes. So here it is. This is So What. The original key is in D. So of course, as I said before, I'm going to move this over to B minor. The default tempo is this up-tempo swing. And again, I'm going to go for something that I'm totally comfortable with. And for me, it's making it sound like a bossa. That's what works for me. And so you have this chart in front of you. And you can change the playing style and tempo, find a groove you like. But for now, we're going to do the bossa acoustic thing and do some call and response. And what this means is I'm going to play some phrases, and you're going to answer me. And at first, I may just do one-bar phrases. It might just be a note or two. And you can respond with a note or two. And then maybe the second time through, I'll do a 4-bar phrase. So, but the main thing is that we're just getting used to playing rhythmically over in this mode. And here's a little mindful prep. I'm home on mute. The only judgment on my playing comes from me. My instrument is a plaything I love, and it makes a sound that feeds me somehow and has been a life companion for me. At this moment, I'm listening and responding using some specific notes that I can shape in any way. This is a musical moment that prepares me to engage ever more deeply into the source of music. just keep going for a long, long time. You know, I love about iReal Pro. These guys never need a break. They don't smoke. You know, they don't need to eat. The pay is ridiculous. And so then after I do that for a while, I do the same thing in C. And, you know, we don't have to do this forever, but hey, let's do a little bit. You can have a lot of fun just spending time in these zones. So that's level 1 is what I would suggest. Level 2 comes a very different skill and learning, and that is to internalize the form of the song. Even though this is a simple 32-bar form, there's 16 bars on B Dorian, 8 bars on C Dorian, then 8 bars on B Dorian. Feeling the big cycles of 4, 8, and 16 bars takes some mindful repetition and learning. And this is a key to internalizing this and other song forms, is being able to feel these cycles of phrases of multiple bars, 2 bars, 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars. And for this song, remember 16, 8, 8. And eventually you'll feel where the change to C Dorian happens. And if you listen to the recordings, you can hear that these soloists actually they'll lead into the C Dorian section by going into C Dorian like a bar early. And it gives this beautiful feeling like the form is actually following their impulse to kind of change the gravity, you know. Feeling the cycles of phrases. So let's do some call and response over the whole form of the song. First time through, I'll play a 1-bar phrase. We'll do what we just did. And you can imitate what I play exactly, or you can play something else entirely. And actually, we're just keeping track of the bars. Second time through, I'll play a 2-bar phrase. You respond with a 2-bar phrase. And then 4 bars, right? And before we do this, again, let's just take a breath and summon our inner timekeeper, who's always there if we can relax into her guidance. And, you might call this a kind of invocation. I said last time that one way that helps me when I'm in situations like this is prayer. And prayer is a kind of invocation when you're calling on this other source to kind of take control of your instrument, of everything that you've practiced, and apply it to music. So we'll do that in the context. I know we're running short of time, but I really want to do this. So let's do it. stop it right there. I'm going to be, you have access of this to practice at home. And again, just in the interest of time, I want to move along very briefly because I wanted to get to the vocal rhythm part of this thing. And certainly if you have to go, we'll understand that. And I made a different arrangement of this tune that I wanted to share with you. And I would call this level 3. And let me stop the share. And the version I made is in 3/4 time. And I've made a play along with the Brazilian samba trace feel. That's a samba in a 3-beat cycle. And this will help with practicing the vocal rhythm that was in the homework from last time. And let's look at it. I asked Emily to pull up this PDF. This is the So What EF score. And first of all, you notice that I've shortened the form. Instead of 32 bars, it's 16. So this is 8 on the B, 4 bars on the C, and 4 bars on the B. It's a little easier to internalize. But for now, I want to draw your attention to the vocal rhythm homework because it'll be fun to sing this with the play along. So let's go to that Adventures in Vocal Rhythm. And I've expanded the notation from the previous homework version. We'll do 2 bars of each rhythm on the top line. So it'll be like this. Takadimi, 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 takat, 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 takadimi, takadimi, takat, takadimi, 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 takat, 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 takat. And this way, each repetition of this melody will be 4 bars of 3/4 time. And you'll notice that the cello pizz part on this uses the takata rhythm. These notes are equal to like dotted 8th notes, but the drum keeps the quarter beat solidly with the drum. So let's just try this. First of all, just listen for a minute to hear how it sounds. 1, 2, 3. This is just the samba. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Got it? So at this tempo, it's going to be takadimi, 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 takadimi. And then I'm sure, as you've already noticed, when you move to the takata, 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 it's the same rate of motion. It's the same 16th note. It's just we're putting them in groups of 3s instead of groups of 4s, like with a quarter. So let's just try this. We're just going to sing this for now. Here we go. Sing it with me. Here it comes. Takadimi, 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 takat, 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 takadimi, 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 takat, 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 takat. C. Takadimi, 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 takat, 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 takadimi, 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 takat, 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 takat. Fun, right? So let's just follow this through. Because the next thing, let's say that you just did that for a while, and and your whole family is hearing this, and they're hearing it incessantly, and you wake up in the middle of the night doing this, you can't help but doing it while you're driving. It's just changing your rhythmic life, basically, and making you a really fun person to live with. And so let's try this by playing with it now. So we're going to play the vocal rhythms on our instrument, and maybe for a while I'll play it like this. I'll accent the notes. So I'm playing all the 16th notes, but I'm really accenting where I want them to accent. So this is if you're playing a string instrument, the bowing pattern is down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, etc. So let's do that together. Second time through, I'm just going to play the accented notes. And then the third time through, play the accents only, but with random notes in the mode. Got it? I'll be doing it too, so you can kind of follow along. Here we go. Now, if you find that incredibly easy, fantastic. And if you find that incredibly hard, that's also fantastic. We can take this PDF down now. Thank you so much, Emily. The beautiful thing that all this stuff can be slowed down. Slowed down. And when I'm practicing the modes, for example, let's say that you're a cello player, what I have done when I'm practicing a new scale or a new chord is I will really limit the range of my practice. So I might just take my first position on the A string, let's say for B Dorian, and notice that it's an open string, a first finger, a third finger on C sharp, and a fourth finger on D. And then I'll notice that to go to C Dorian on that same string in that same position, I have the open A string as a common tone, B flat, C second finger, and D fourth finger. And I will simply internalize the sound and the change in my hand position as I move between those two modes. So that is a way that you can really limit the range of things in order to experience mastery and musical freedom within a small parameter. This is an important part of this course, is communicating how we can break things down, but at every level of breaking it down, you can experience musical freedom within there. And that is our priority, is to really find that sense of spaciousness within the material and grow increasingly comfortable with the material as it's presented. So those are the things I wanted to go through today. In the materials, there will also be a play-along in G Lydian that I hope that will be enjoyable for you to simply stay within that mode and make music. And when you do, consider your phrasing, consider your rhythmic interaction, use space. You know, for us new improvisers, we're tempted to fill up the space all the time. And that is a sure sign that you're uncomfortable. So get comfortable with leaving space and with not playing. So again, that is the end of the presentation that I had planned for today. I'm in no rush to move along. If there are comments and conversations to be had now, I am happy to engage with you.
I have
Hi.
a question.
Hi, Tina.
Oh,
Hi, somebody else has a question though.
Go ahead, Tina.
Okay. You were talking about non-syntactic and syntax stuff with syntax. And my understanding of this, I just wanted to check, is that syntactic has to do with melody, harmony, and rhythm. Those are kind of, I wouldn't call them necessarily more advanced tools to improvisation, but they're maybe a little more complicated, and that many people start non-syntactic just talking about color or texture. Okay, so you're making a distinction there between the two, and I've always made that distinction, but I didn't make them. For example, I don't know where to put rhetoric in that. A lot of times when I start people with improvisation, I tell them it's like telling a story or having an argument, or I give them some type of verbal model for them.
Yeah, then the question is what tools to employ to tell that story. Yeah, yeah. Those are all good comments. Yeah, I don't know if it's more advanced. I might call it more precise in terms of because the more precise you get with syntactical elements, harmony, rhythm, and melody, the more you begin to emerge into a specific style of some kind.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how I might respond to that.
I talk about patterns too, and that's really pretty hard to have people improvising using patterns. It's kind of my goal when I get, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, reducing formal elements, to make people at ease, I think is another gift that we get from Africa. The shorter cyclic forms that often appear in folk music, and in important African music, those can be shorter forms, and that can really help to liberate the improviser.
Thank you.
Yeah, some comments here. Helmut signing off. Karnakal is the name for this kind of drum language of India. Yes, Patricia notes that. Karnakal. Mind-blowingly gorgeous Carnatic strings. Oh yeah, Trina Basu Ramamurthy and her husband Arun Ramamurthy. They're great. Glad to have that in the chat. Thank you, Patricia. Okay. I think Esther is suggesting some different prompts there for improvising, if I understand that right. That's very cool. Any other comments?
I have a question.
Sure, Esther.
I love improvising and teaching improv, and I have had extremely negative experiences for myself improvising within a jazz context. And I was very surprised to have that come up in our little session just now. So I'm thinking about, okay, this is my chance to really work through that, really go somewhere with that, as opposed to saying, check, here's another bad experience in my head. So I think you've already been touching on this with the meditative practice, but maybe if you could just give a few really quick kind of things to think about as a response to that, and in the future, I will learn more in our next session.
I totally sympathize with the feeling that you've had from improvising in a jazz setting, possibly before you're prepared for that setting. And because I've had that too, and that I know how that feels. That does not feel good. And that's why I suggest breaking things down and really starting at the beginning, acknowledging that this is a language that is a very specific language. It would be the same thing, to suddenly land yourself on, the stage of an early Shakespearean play. And, you wouldn't have the references, you wouldn't have the cultural references, you wouldn't have the pronunciation, you wouldn't have the vocabulary. You simply would be a bit at sea. And of course that would make you extremely self-conscious and uncomfortable. So it's very, very similar with this. And the process of cutting these things down into very, very learnable small bites is exactly what I had to do for myself without a teacher. I had to really acknowledge, what I knew and what I didn't know, and start very, very slowly with care. And just know that you are not alone in this process. Absolutely. I am right there with you, and I think many of us on this call have been through this as well. So in the same way that I just suggested taking a certain hand position on a certain string and just exploring what the mode feels like with those 3 or 4 notes, and once you feel comfortable with that, maybe go to the next string in the same position. This is what I have done with the most complicated things that I've had to learn, and I find it helpful to really break it down in small bits. And I hope that is helpful, but above all, just to know that you're part of a community, that we're all doing the same work.
I'm fascinated with what this is doing to my interest in classical music, I have to tell you. So I'm on a sidetrack here, going through all my favorite piano pieces, Chopin and Beethoven, and ones where I can make complicated chords. It's harder to do on a cello, and imagining them improvising. And then I'm coming to, okay, what is the emotion change by that one note change in that chord? Which is a little bit more in classical than in jazz, I think. And I'm getting really derailed by this, because the more you do here, the more I want to do that. So I've got 2 parallel tracks going on here.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's stay in touch. I don't want you to have a psychotic break between jazz and classical music.
It feels good, actually.
Good. Well, I hope it's mind expanding and not troubling.
It's mind-blowing, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Marcia.
I just wanted to say that, this idea that you've shared about, learning a new handshake, where we're just like thinking about a 3-note shift between the chords. I mean, that to me is the stepping stone from between rhythm and melody, or rhythm and harmony, because I'm no longer thinking about long legato cello lines and melody so much as I am taking a melodic element, a 3-note pattern, and plugging it into what will be a rhythmic pattern now, because I've limited it to 3 notes. So that to me is a stepping stone. It just seems really valuable.
Fantastic. Yeah, stepping stones are really valuable. Thank you so much, Marcia, for that affirmation. Absolutely right. So glad that's working.
On a previous workshop I took with you, Eugene, you had this quote stuck with me, which is that you don't have to be a good player to be a good improviser. I think I might be paraphrasing, but I extrapolated that to be also that you don't have to be like a pristine technician to be an emotionally impactful artist.
Absolutely right,
And
Patricia.
So I try to remind myself of that when I'm like, oh God, I made a mistake in the thing, and as long
Big time.
I feel like as long as it's not an orchestral setting where they won't like that I did that, if you make mistakes in, you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
Speaking to what Esther was saying, I would never say like, oh yes, I played jazz, like that. Knowing real jazz musicians, I'm like, I would never say that. But also knowing that like you could commit to the thing you're doing and just try to play from that emotional, artistic place, and not be so concerned with I hit one note that I would consider incorrect, and that kind of thing. But I always remind myself of that, because you spoke about in our first session, you'll have some performance where you're like, oh my God, I really blew that, and then afterwards people are like, I loved it so much, it was amazing. And so it still can be received in this very positive way, and I remind myself also that probably we are each our own harshest critic, and probably not everyone is even dissecting what we're doing in the way that we are. But
Absolutely
I'm right there with
right.
you. I hate that feeling of like, oh God, the chord progressions are so fast.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you've touched on some very, very important things there. And, I'll just extrapolate that to aging. I'm getting older. I don't have the same kind of quality of relationship with my instrument I had 15, 20 years ago. And so my new thing is to play what you can play. I will play what I can play. I love playing. I'm going to keep playing, and I will play what I can play. I'm not judging myself against 1986, my big year, but and the other thing is, they said that at the end of the life of Pablo Casals, the great Catalonian cellist, he could play a single note and make people cry. So that just reinforces exactly what you're saying. Any other comments or wrap-ups?
Yeah, I wanted to share something about jazz, and a bad experience I also had was that I was playing with a rock group in Chicago at the same time I was playing in the lyric opera, and it was called Murs Pictures after Kurt Schwitters, a famous post World War I artist. And we played in Dorian all the time. And I finally went, God, I've got to expand my horizon here. So I started taking lessons with a jazz teacher, and he was a saxophonist, and he'd never had a string player as a student. And he had me transcribe so many Charlie Parker tunes. I have a whole notebook full of them. And I copied the solos and learned about patterns, but I didn't learn really anything about improvising. And it was so discouraging that, it was not good. So I could relate to what you said about the jazz thing.
That's excellent, Jeanette. That's very, very helpful. Yeah, and on behalf of all human beings everywhere, I issue an apology for the kind of bad experiences we've had as students from teachers who shouldn't be there.
Now I feel better, thanks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we've gone considerably over the clock. Like I said, I'm in no rush. I'm here to make sure this works for people. So, but if there are no more comments, let's sign off for now. And again, as Emily said, we'll be sending links to all the materials tomorrow and some things that we did not cover today. So my hope is that you'll have a rich kind of folder full of little projects and games to play that will always further enrich your relationship with your music and the joy of making it. So we'll sign off for today. Thank you all for your good participation and attention. Yeah, so good to see you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now.